I'm Sean with Chasing Mustangs LLC.
I'm Dain with the Shop DIY Garage.
Today we want to talk about the lessons learned with the Sniper EFI system. And we've done 3 of them, you and me. You've done other ones. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of lessons learned. And every car seems to bring its own set of problems. It doesn't matter what you think you know, a car will bring up a challenge along the way. And a shout out here to Dain. If you're in the Fort Worth area, you need to work on your car. Dain's got lifts, he's got AC, which right now in Texas is worth it. It's something you gotta have. In fact, I would say it's worth just to use your AC to come down this time of year, you know. But he's got tools and all that, and he'll help you out along the way. So if you're looking at doing like an EFI system in your car, or just fixing some brakes, you know, you'll save some money and there'll be some help along the way. So we've done I think we did a 302 EFI, we did a 3.8 Fox body, and we did a 200 inline six. So we've done the gamut of 4.
Yeah.
And some of them were a little bit easier than others. Some were, I would say, while we had certain challenges, they were all fixed, right?
Yeah.
Let's just say, I'm impressed with the EFI and I'm sold on it. So I highly recommend buying one. Dain convinced me to get it. I wanted to stay.
At first, you didn't want to.
No, and honestly, I thought it was a waste of money because I'm like, I can rebuild a carburetor for $250. Why would I spend a couple grand on EFI? But the reality is, once these are tuned, you don't have to go back. You set it and forget it. And that's why I'm a fan of it. For someone that rents cars, I know that they can go out and it doesn't matter if it's cold, hot.
It's going to run.
It's going to run.
It's going to run efficiently. Yeah.
Exactly. And I had tuned one of my cars when it was 105, the carburetor, to get it go out, and then it was 20 degrees. And the car, it didn't want to run. So that's where these EFI systems just simplify life. Yep. You don't have to retune them and go, oh geez, the car sat for 2 months, I better check the carburetor before it goes out for rent.
You're just taking an old car and making it run like a newer one. It's not going to be a newer car. It's not going to be exactly like a brand new car at the showroom, but you know, if it's 20 degrees outside or 105 degrees outside, as long as the tune's good, it's going to start up right away and you'll be able to drive it however far along you want to go.
I think that's a valid point when you say it's not like multi-fuel, right?
Yeah.
And
it still acts like, it's still an older car, it's still an older engine, it's still an older system, but you have more of a liability or longevity and how it acts as a newer car does, as the fuel and the computer system. It's got a brain now. It's not just all mechanical stuff. It's actually got a brain that's okay. The fuel's a little off because
it's hot.
You drove 400 miles south here. Now you're at sea level, and the air fuel is different than it is up where we're at. So the brain of it, the computer, actually adjusts that to where if it's a carbureted car, you can adjust a little bit on its own, but you still might have to tweak it once you get down to that part where you don't have to do that anymore.
And that's worth it in itself. Oh yeah. Not to be on a constant tuning.
Yep.
And then you have to have vacuum hoses and some of those test gauges with you and stuff like that. You don't have to worry about the EFI. What's great about the computer, if you're running hot, fuel ratio's wrong, it's
got dummy lights.
It's got dummy lights. So if you're really having a problem, all you have to do is look at the computer screen and go, okay, this is not working right. I got to figure out why it's acting this way. So one of the lessons we learned was you need to make sure you have good spark plugs and a good wire set. Now, some of this was my fault, but when I brought in a lot of cars, and I purchased a lot of cars in a short time period, sometimes you don't want to spend the money, and I didn't, right? It's expensive to put EFI on a car, so it's like, well, the person that sold me the car said 2 years ago they put new spark plugs and wires in the car, right?
Yeah. Sometimes you can't trust everybody.
Exactly, and one of the cars, the gaps were wrong and the wires were too small, right? And
weren't efficient enough for what EFI kits do. Require thicker, more core size spark plug wire just to have that efficiency and that good connection. And you can make it work with what we had, but
it's not worth the little things.
No, because you're going to start having little problems here and there, and they do recommend when you go through all the setup, it does recommend certain size spark plug wires, certain gaps that usually are about the same as the stock ones would be. But yeah, it's always nice just to start with new.
Start with new.
And
Lesson learned.
Spend the money at first thing,
Yeah.
and just know that everything's new and is the right size, the
Right
right
gap.
equipment. Yeah, right equipment for what you're running.
And the lesson learned now, if you got a car coming in, maybe you replaced it a few years ago and you know it's good, that's one thing. Unfortunately, some of the cars that I had come in, I knew nothing about
Yeah.
it.
Someone might have said they did it. It might have been 2 years ago, but really it was 10 years ago.
Well, I think it was about 10 years
Yeah.
ago. One of the cars, the 200, we ended up putting a Hyperspark in there.
Correct.
And I think it's about $800 to get a Hyperspark, so it's not cheap. But we were fighting everything on the car, and there was a lot of limitations to the parts out there for the 200 engine.
Yeah.
And they're all rebuilds. Remember we were talking about that? Everything's a rebuild, and we were fighting it. We put the Hyperspark system on, done.
Yep.
And I recommend, if you're having problems with the ignition, I know it's not cheap, but if you're fighting the ignition system, especially when you're talking rebuilt parts and aftermarket,
Or piecing things together.
or piecing things,
Yeah.
that was really probably the problem. We were
Yeah.
piecing things together. As soon as we went with the Hyperspark, problem's gone.
Yep.
And what's cool about the Hyperspark too is the computer talks and it can retard timing, it can change it, versus if you're just doing that standard setup, it can't do that.
Yeah,
You know,
there's still more manual labor that you have to do. And I'm not saying it doesn't work, but if you're wanting to just be able to hop in the car and go, spend a little extra money, a little extra more labor time, but it's the best thing in the long run. You set it and go. You get it perfect, and then it reads on its own, it calibrates itself, and it can adjust, like you said, adjust timing and on its own, and you don't have to do anything about it.
and I didn't realize till later too, if you want to put RPM restrictions,
Yep.
you got to have Hyperspark.
Especially if you're letting other people drive, you're renting these
Exactly.
out, you don't want them full throttling on it.
Yeah, so, and it can adjust timing
Yep.
based on parameters if you don't want to overheat and some other things.
Yep.
So the Hyperspark gives you more than just an ignition box. It
Yep.
gives you the ability to set it depending on whatever criteria you want. You know, out of the box it's fine, but for me, as someone that rents cars, we put
Nice to
restrictions on the RPM so
Yep.
that if someone does try to go too fast in the car,
Yeah.
it's not gonna go. The 200 horsepower thing. Yeah, so, yeah, Dane's laughing at this. This is something, and I have in this box a 4-barrel. And, you know, as a Ford 302 guy, you kind of think, just out of 4-barrel, it's not worth my time, right?
Yeah.
Here's the reality, though. The first page of the manual says must be a 200 horsepower engine at the crank. So everybody says, well, a 302, Dane, it's 200 horsepower. Well, that didn't come till the 90s.
Yeah. Just because it's a V8 doesn't mean it's making all the power you think it is. It might sound like it is. It sounds great.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's making 400, 500, but
Yeah,
in
yeah.
reality, it's...
You know, in the car, it did sound like that,
Yeah.
honestly.
And
It just basically put too much fuel into the system.
yeah, you're dry. This system was drowning that 302. That 302, if it's a stock, really any early V8 cars was, what'd you say, maybe mid 80s to...
They didn't go to roller cam till 86 on the 302.
Yeah.
So until you get to roller cam, you don't go 200, everything's under 200
Yeah.
horsepower.
And it's not just Ford, it's Chevy, it's Mopar and everything. Those early V8s, they didn't make power. I mean, maybe a little torque, but like their peak power was, they say 200 something, but in reality it's under a 200 horsepower motor, stock, if you're stock everything. And this is just, a 4-barrel is way too much fuel for what that is. And honestly, you could trim this down. We trimmed the fuel down so much that it still is it just bogs it out.
It just bogs it. It wasn't worth the effort, in my
No.
opinion. To tune this to get under 200,
Yeah.
why?
We could have gotten it to work, but sitting there for days trying to fix the tune on that to what, it took you 30 minutes to swap
Yeah,
it?
it's 30 minutes to swap it, and then the
I
problem's
was
gone.
busy, so it was easy. Everything's there. The 2-barrel and the 4-barrel are all the same. They look the same. The fuel lines are all the same. It's unbolt, take it off, put the 2-barrel on, bolt it back in, plug everything back in, and bam, it ran
perfect.
Perfect, ran better, and
Yeah.
So the tune for that, and it was great.
So don't get stuck in the it has to be a 4-barrel.
Yeah.
And they're not the same as a carburetor. I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, with a carburetor, you can make any 4-barrel work.
Well, yeah, because you can adjust the jets, you can put different jets in it. That's actually got injectors in the throttle body on that part, and you can adjust the pressure on it, but still, there's 2 injectors inside those, so it's not like pulling a pill out of a carburetor and be able to go down on a size. But yeah, that's if you think you're making more than 209 times out of 10, you're probably not.
Yeah. And engine sound doesn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, they sound great, but they're really only pushing 160, 180 horsepower.
And then you pulled the block information for me. We found out it was actually what, an 80, the engine in the car was an 83, what, Bronco engine?
It was a Bronco.
It was a Bronco engine.
Yeah.
When I looked at the specs, 154 horsepower.
Yeah.
So again, not even close enough. And again, the car sounds great. I don't want to, but again, the sound of a car has nothing to do with what its horsepower is. And the car actually seems fast because it's got like a, like a 327 rear end or something weird on it because it's got a Bronco rear end.
Yeah, it's a manual 3-speed.
Yeah.
It's very torquey, but
yeah.
Just, yeah, like I said, just do your research on that motor. Like I said, if it's a stock block, and 9 times out of 10, 2-barrel will be the best. But if you got a cam, head work, and it's a little souped up, then yeah, a 4-barrel would be perfect. But if it's just a stock motor that maybe even has just a baby cam, then it just 2-barrel would be more than what, because even the 2-barrels still go up to what, 400 horsepower, I think?
360 horsepower.
Yeah, so even a mild build on a 2-barrel would be perfect for that.
Exactly. And they're also easier to tune. You don't have to worry about the progressive links and stuff too. 2-barrel, it's, you know, I like simplicity. And the 2-barrel's simple.
Oh yeah.
So the other thing, purchase the kit with 40 feet. I put that because how many times did I run back and get more line?
All 3 vehicles.
All 3 vehicles.
But we also found out was that the Holley, the sending unit. So when you're doing a sniper kit, you have to put a different new sending unit in because it's got electronic fuel pump now and all. But we found out that at least the 3 cars that we did, they make a sending unit hat that actually has a return nipple on it. You have to run with these are a return style fuel system, so you have to run a return line, and the kit comes with
20 feet.
20 feet, and then it also comes with a AN fitting with an elbow, and then you drill and tap, or drill and insert the fitting. But we found sending units that actually have a built-in, already plumbed nipple for returns. But also, we didn't use the factory feed line. We upgraded.
The manual says you're supposed to. Now,
yeah,
I don't think we want to go into that debate, but let's be honest.
If it's the original fuel lines, you might as well, because they're already, even those older cars, they're small, very, very small fuel lines.
Like 5/16 line and stuff.
I think that they recommend 3/8 lines, so it's best to buy the 40 because you're going to run a new feed line, and then you're also going to need to run a return line too. So, and most older cars are within, the engine to the tank is within 15 to 18 feet.
Well, you wouldn't think that. When I bought the kit, I'm like, well, that's not that far. It's only like 6 feet.
Oh, yeah, the cars are older, so you'd rather have a little extra than not enough, so yeah.
And you're going to buy it anyways.
Yeah.
I had to go out and buy it anyways, even though I tried to save $120. It's exactly the same price.
Yeah.
I think you save $5 or something if you buy it with it or something.
I mean, lucky for us, it's 20 minutes down the road, but it also is 20 minutes in traffic and this and that, but it just it's nice to just go ahead and have everything at once, so you don't have to make those second trips to the store.
Worst thing when you have extra wine laying around.
That's if you're always working on something, you're going to need it anyway.
You're going to need it anyway. So just spend the money. That way you know you have it. You don't have to run back to a store and run a lot of the aftermarkets like an AutoZone, it's a non-shielded line.
Yeah.
And they say they're the same. I have a hard time believing they're the same. You know, so the other thing, make sure you have a reliable power on source. Now, they made me buy this, and I've always used like a multimeter, but this is a Power Pro. This thing makes life easy.
Oh, yeah.
After he made me buy this, I use it for everything.
Yeah.
And not only that, it'll crackle and be a static noise if you don't have clean power. So that's telling you, even though it might be, if you're getting a lot of static, then you have to worry, do you really have a good power source? In these old cars, how many times did we have a good power source, but it wasn't clean? It wasn't clean, and it created all sorts of problems for us. So, but I think these are what, like $120 or something like
Roughly,
that?
yeah, right around 100.
And this one I just got from Harbor Freight. If you really want to do this right and you don't want to be troubleshooting, every one of the cars, you had to go back and find a different power source. So, and it's just key on. You wouldn't think it's hard, but old cars.
Yeah.
Old cars, old wires.
Yep. Well, they're not, they weren't made to have a real nice, clean power source for something like this. And but the best thing about that power probe too is, say you got a sensor or a switch that's not labeled, or you the reverse light switch. I think we tested out with that too. The reverse lights weren't working. We had the wires and everything, and we ended up using that to make sure that switch was working, and it was. And we ended up finding you can backfeed harnesses, switches to see what is broken. I think there's a line or part of the wire is broken, but yeah, it's not just, you can use that more than just finding a good ground or a good hotline. You can actually use that to diagnose electrical problems as well. And it's a very distinct sound when that thing goes off, and it's a great tool.
Especially like if you need a ground too, if you're worried about your ground, testing for ground, it's worth the money. Dain made me buy a lot of stuff throughout this, but they were things that I didn't know about and made all the difference in the world. Trying to make sure you use your multimeter, are you on the right? And, this just makes it easy.
I think the 65, we use that for the fuel pump because we were having problems with the fuel pump, not the wire. We had a electrical problem where the fuel pump wasn't staying on, and we ended up finding that reason with that too. And it's a great tool to have. Like,
absolutely.
$100 sounds like a lot, but in reality, it makes a lot of diagnosing problems a whole lot easier, and it's worth it.
Oh, absolutely. The other thing was go through the throttle position sensor setup when you're doing it. Holley's got some videos out there. It's really simple, but you want to have your throttle position sensor between, I think it's 2 and 5.
Something like that.
Yeah, so make sure, because when the car heats up, that throttle, if you don't have that set right, it will cause you problems. And the weird thing is, it's not like they're, again, major problems, but your car,
stuff that you got to tinker with.
You got to tinker with it. So just do the setup and go through the steps. It's 10
very
minutes.
simple, yeah.
Yeah, it's 10 minutes to go through it. So
it's a single person job. One person can do it.
So on the HyperSpark, the reason why it's so expensive is you have to buy the distributor, you got to buy the brain, and then you got to buy the coil. So you don't want to mix and match these. Now I've seen where people say, oh, you can go get a cheaper coil, get a cheaper ignition box. It's not worth it.
No.
Use everything, and I mean, I've even seen people say, well, I can go to AutoZone for the fuel pump. Don't use the one in the kit and buy that $40 fuel pump and stuff.
It might work, but who knows how long it's going to work.
Exactly. And when you start fighting problems, where are you going to go to troubleshoot it? So again, it's not cheap, but they make a harness for $200. That's with the plug and play harness. We use that on one of the cars.
Yeah, the kits come with, say you buy the Sniper kit and then you buy the HyperSpark kit. They come with pigtails that you can easily butt connect and wire into the kit that comes with the Sniper. But then, like you said, they have a plug and play harness that eliminates the original harness that comes with this, and it all plugs in the Sniper, and it's all loomed, looks great, it's all labeled. That's the best part, is that every plug is labeled and very simply written, that you know exactly what it's going to. There's no guessing like, I think it goes to this, but it's labeled perfect. And
I think you're right, it looks good, because when the 65, the bay was clean.
Yeah.
We wanted to keep it looking good. And honestly, you could do a pretty good job, I guess, but when you're starting to pay for time, that, you're going to take 3 hours of wiring out.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So, with that harness. So they're about $200. My opinion is worth the money.
Yeah.
And I would go with it. I just wouldn't hesitate. This kit,
Just makes the job easier.
You know, I haven't bought it yet, and I called Holley, and it sounds like I can run with this one, but I'm definitely gonna try to get a hold of that to make it easier.
Yeah.
And this kit in front of you, minus we're putting a 2-barrel. We have another car we're gonna do, and we'll film that. Double check vacuum lines after driving the car.
Yeah.
So one of the cars was extremely retarded and ended up blowing all the caps off.
Yeah.
And so I just do a basic check on your vacuum lines. It will create more problems. One vacuum line problem.
Especially the 80s ones.
Yeah, the
That's
80s.
The 83.
Oh yeah.
It looked like a bowl of spaghetti underneath that hood with all the vacuum lines from all the emission stuff. But yeah, I mean, one wrong little vacuum line could cause a headache, and it did a little bit, but it's all figured out now and runs great.
One of the other things I put on there, if you have a lower horsepower car like the 83, that 3.8 liter I think made like 110 horsepower or something like that. I end up wiring in the wide open throttle and the EC relay on.
Yeah.
If you have a lower, I would say any car probably under 150 horsepower, if you don't wire those in, getting the engine tuned
Yeah.
is a pain, because when you tune it and turn that AC on, it drops, it doesn't idle right. So those relays are what, $5?
Yeah.
So, and Holley's got a wiring diagram. It's really easy to wire in. So on the 83, until I wired that in, I just couldn't get the tune with the AC on, right? And as soon as you turn on the AC,
It bogs it down.
it would bog it down. But with that relay on it, basically has 2 fuel maps, one with AC and one without. If the computer doesn't know AC's on, it's going to assume
Think something's wrong. It's going to throw a bunch of fuel at it, and then it's bogging down and this and that. But
so. It's easy to wire. It's well worth the time. The biggest problem, I just had to add another dang set of relays to that engine bay, which there's like 30, I swear, in that car. But the other thing is timing, and you know, we were talking about making sure your spark plugs are good. Now, if you're putting if you're going to put a hyper spark in the system, you have to reset the engine to 0 and then
top dead center, and then adjust it by a couple degrees.
I think there's like a plastic thing there, right?
They make those dummy proofs on that too. They give you you get top dead center, insert the distributor. They give you a nice plastic cap that has notches where if it's not perfectly where it needs to be at, it's not going to fit. You adjust it, and the cap fits. You lock it down, and you're set. I think the 83 was, or the 65.
65.
It was 5 degrees advanced, I think it was, that it needed to be set at, and that cap literally, if it's not at 5 degrees advanced, you can make it work, but it's not going to run right to where that cap, you put it on, you might need to adjust it just a little bit, and perfect, set it, and now you're good, and it started up perfectly fine. So they definitely did their due diligence and made it very, very simple to add all this on to your vehicle. And it's a lot of work, but a lot of man hours. Is just not difficult. It's just
you weren't
on
having to retime it,
Yeah.
start it, which would be a pain trying to put a new system
Yeah.
on, you know, where you could just
Yeah.
put it in, lock it in,
Yep.
then you can start the car. But if you're using the stock, you got to make sure your timing's
Yeah.
good. So this is one of the mistakes I made. I had set timing on the 83 a couple years ago, but it hadn't moved. And I'm like, oh, don't worry about the timing, it's good. And no, it was way retarded and created some problems. So I had to go back and set timing. My advice is, if you're not using the Hyperspark, because you're going to have to redo the timing anyways, but if you're using your stock, make sure your time is good. And make sure it's not like, you know, some people will, you know, want to go till they hear the pinging. That's fine if you want performance.
Yeah.
But that may not be your good starting point.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're like running 18 degrees and you're thinking, oh, I got all this performance, you might want to back it to 14, get the car running, and then advance it otherwise. In other words, make sure your timing is safe when you start.
Yeah.
You know, not my grandfather did. He would just turn it, right? When it would ping, he would back it off, lock it down, right? He didn't like, I don't care what the manual says, you know. And I just wouldn't do that. You know, after seeing the problems we fought, putting it in a safe area, you can always go later. You can always add timing.
Yeah, for what you need to, because they're just cruiser cars. They don't
exactly.
You don't be pushing all the power it has in that motor out. It needs to run, it needs to start, run good, idle good, and be able to take it, drive it wherever you want to go, turn it on, it turns on perfect.
Yeah, that's really what I want, yeah. You
Right.
know, have anything to add and you say, hey, I've done a Holley kit, please, you know, post in the link down below some lessons that you've learned. Thanks, Dain, again for stopping by, or I guess I stopped by your place. But thanks again, and we're gonna hopefully do some more videos like this. Please subscribe, and thanks for watching.